Coding Dojo is a programming school that turns beginners into developers in only 14 weeks. Over 90% of their grads land jobs within 3 months of graduating, often making over $70K per year. To learn more, visit codingdojo.com or click the link in the description below. Hey, what's going on, guys? So I've wanted to make a Redux with React tutorial for beginners for a while now, and I've tried this quite a bit, but I can't seem to explain all of Redux in a practical way that's not overwhelming to people that are just trying to learn it. And it's something that I struggled with for a while, and now that I understand it, I'm kind of struggling to explain it. So I'm going to go with just a little bit of theory and what it is and why we use Redux, and then just simply implement it into a brand new React component. All right, and the key audience for this video is people that already know the basics of React but are either unfamiliar with Redux, or they're struggling with it, or they're just getting into it. If you already know Redux, you're going to know all this stuff anyways, but still feel free to watch. Now, I think the biggest issue with Redux, at least for me, it was the amount of boilerplate or setup, as well as all the terminology. At least from my experience a few years ago when I learned React, I really liked it. I thought it was easy to learn. You know, it was very powerful. And when Redux was thrown at me, I got all these brand new terms like store and actions, reducers, containers, all these new concepts, and then you have the crazy boilerplate setup, and it kind of redefines building a React application, and it was a little disappointing, honestly. But once you get the hang of it and you get over that boilerplate and all the terms, it's very beneficial for large applications. In fact, it's pretty much mandatory for large applications where you have a lot of components that need to interact with each other, need to share the same state, and so on. All right, so basically the overall idea and purpose of Redux is pretty simple. In React, you have components which have their own state, and let's say you have a form component. You'll have state that holds like the value of each field. Typically your data is stored in your state as well. Maybe it's from a request from an API or something like that. Now, when you have a large application with a lot of different components, managing individual component state is very difficult, and it gets very messy. And that's where Redux comes in, or any state manager. Flux is another one which I really don't like. That's much worse than Redux. Instead of component level state, you get application level state as a one-way data flow. Okay, and state is immutable. It comes from the top down, and you don't really change it. It's just kind of recreated. All right, so let's take a look at a diagram here so I can kind of explain it in a relatively simple way. Now, down here you have your view, which is basically your React components, and then you have your store, which includes your state, and it sends the state down to your component. All right, now inside your component you may have a button that you click, or a form that's to be submitted, and that will fire off an action, okay, or an action creator, which will display dispatch an action to the store. All right, now you have these reducers, which are pure functions that specify how the application's state should change in response to that action. All right, and then the reducers respond with that new state. And like I said, state is immutable, so it can't really be modified. It's basically recreated as new state. And in turn, that gets sent down to your component, and your component will react accordingly to that state, okay? Whether it's fetching posts or fetching data from a server or an API, whether it's changing a form from an edit state to a create state, or whatever it may be. A state is basically just a JavaScript array or a JavaScript object with values in it. All right, so hopefully that didn't just confuse the shit out of you and turn you off from Redux forever. Let's jump into some code, and hopefully it'll make a little bit more sense. All right, so I think the best way to do this is just to create an application from scratch using the Create React App CLI. And then what we'll do is create a couple components before we introduce Redux. So we're going to create a post component, which will fetch a list of posts from this JSON placeholder API, which is just basically a fake REST API. And then we also want a form component to add a post. Now this is a good example of when to use Redux, when you want to basically share state between components. So we want to be able to add a post through the form, but the form is a completely separate component than the list. But when we add a post through the form, the list should update. So it's basically going to go up into Redux. We're going to create an action when we submit the form. The reducer will then change the state. It'll come down to the post component. All right, so let's go ahead and get started here. Now you're going to need the create react app CLI. If you don't have that, just do an npm install -g create -react -app, and that will get that installed globally. I already have it installed, so that'll go really quick. So once you do that, you just want to run create react app and then name your application. I'm just going to call this Redux example. And we will be writing quite a bit of just of regular React code before we implement Redux, just because I want to kind of show you the difference. We will make the fetch request from the actual post component at first, and then we'll move it to a Redux action. So now let's cd into Redux example, and let's go ahead and open up Visual Studio Code, which is the text editor I'm using. And if you're using this with React, one of the extensions that I recommend is the ES7, right here, ES7 React Redux GraphQL extension. It includes just a bunch of different snippets for creating React components, stuff to do with React Native, prop types, GraphQL, even just regular console commands. It's a really handy extension. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'm going to open up my integrated terminal now, and I'm just going to run npm start to start up our React Dev server. And that'll open up on port 3000 by default. And there we go. So there's our boilerplate application. Now what we'll do is go into source, and let's create a new folder called components. And inside components, we're going to create two files. One is going to be post.js, that's our post component, and let's also create postform.js. So we'll start out with post. Now with the React extension for VS Code, I can do rcc tab, and that'll give me a class-based component. If I wanted a functional-based component, I could do rfc tab, and that'll give us a function. All right, but we want a class. So the component name is going to be posts, and what I'm going to do is just get rid of the export default right here, and then we're going to put that down at the bottom. Whoops. I'm going to put that down here and export default posts like that. Alright, so in here let's just put an H1 for now, and we'll just say posts. So now what I'm going to do is bring it into my main app.js component. So we'll say import posts from components/posts. And then down here I'm just going to replace this whole paragraph right here. Yeah, so we'll just get rid of that, and we'll put in our post component. And this is not an intro to React video, so I'm assuming that you guys at least know the basics of React. So now our post component is showing. So I'm going to go back to that component, and what we want to do is when it renders, or I'm sorry, when it mounts, we want to make our request to the API to fetch our posts. So that's going to go into a lifecycle method called component will mount. Okay, and this will run right away when the component mounts. So if we say console log 1 2 3, and we go over here and we look at our console, you can see that that's run. Okay, so this is where we want to make our fetch request. I'm just going to use the fetch API. You could use Axios if you want. So let's do fetch, and we want the URL, which is, let's see, we want posts. So we want to grab this right here, and that's going to be our URL. and then fetch returns a promise, so it'll give us a result that we need to map to JSON, and then another then, and that'll give us our data, and then we can console.log the data. So if I save that and we go back to our application, you'll see that it's logging 100 different posts. Okay, so that's the default. It's going to grab 100. So what we want to do is put this into the component state. Now we haven't implemented Redux yet. When we do, we're going to put it into the application state using Redux. But for now, let's just put it in the component state. So we need a constructor. And this constructor will take in props, and we'll say super props, and then for the state we can just say this dot state equals an object, and then posts is just going to be an empty array by default. Now when we make our request, we want to fill that post value with the data. So in here we can say this dot set state, and we want to set posts to the data that comes in, which is this array down here. Alright, now that on its own isn't going to show anything. We need to add to our render here. So what I'll do is go above the return and create a variable called post items, and we basically just want to map through our posts. So we'll say this dot state dot posts, which we can access now, and then we're going to do a dot map. And inside the map, we're going to use post as our variable, and then we're going to use a little bit of JSX here. So we'll say div. We have to give it a unique key. Okay, whenever we loop through something like this, it has to have a unique key, or React will bitch about it. So we actually don't want quotes. This is going to be the post ID. And then in here, let's just put an H3. It's not working now. H3, and this is where the post title will go, and then we'll just put a paragraph, and this is where the post body will go. Okay, and if we look at the post that we get, you can see we have title, body ID. There's also a user ID, but we're not going to use that. So now that we have that, let's insert it down here under the H1 by just saying post items, like that. And there we go. So now we're fetching the post and we're putting them into our component, into the render. One thing I want to do is just go to the app CSS file. I don't care about the style really. I'm not going to use like Bootstrap or anything. This is all for functionality, not looks, but I am just going to get rid of the text center and just set the width to 90% and the margin to auto. Alright, so now what we want to do is just add a form above it. So we'll go to our post form. Sometimes it does this. This isn't working now. So I'll just copy the post component, I guess. And we'll just change this to post form. And we don't need the component will mount. And then we don't need this post items in the render. We'll get rid of this as well. And we'll just put an H1 that says add post. And then of course we need to change the export to post form. Alright, and then for the state we don't need the list of the array of posts anymore, so we'll get rid of that. So we'll save and then go back to our app.js, and we're going to bring that in as well. So post form, and then we'll just insert it right above the post down here. And then I'll just put an HR separating them. Let's see, what did I do wrong? Does not match. Oh, this should be a lowercase f because that's the file name. There we go. So now our add post is here, so let's add the form below it. So let's see, we're just going to create a very, very simple form. It's not going to be pretty. We'll say form, and we'll have label. Let's do a div, and then inside here we'll have a label, and we'll just say title, and we'll put a line break here, and then an input. Type will be text. I'll add the React stuff to the inputs after. I just want the form to show for now. So under that, let's see, we can let's copy this, and this will be the body, and this will be a text area actually. And these need names as well, so this will be name body, this one will be name title. And then let's see, under this div we'll put a button. Let's put a line break, and button, it'll have a type of submit, and let's just say submit, and save. Okay, so now we have our ugly form. That's fine. We'll actually put a line break here. There. Alright, so what we want to do is each of these input values are going to be part of our component state. So up here we'll say state title, which will be blank by default, body, which will be blank, and then for the inputs we want to put the value. So the value is going to be equal to, we don't want any quotes, it's going to be equal to this dot state dot title, and then this one here we'll say value equals, I keep putting quotes, this dot state dot body. Alright, now if I save this and I go and I try to enter something, I can't, because what we need to do is add an onChange event. And I know a lot of you guys know this stuff, but just for those of you that don't, we're going to create an onChange, so we'll put that right here. onChange equals this dot onChange. Alright, and then let's see, we'll just copy that and put that down here as well. Okay, and then we need to bind this. Now we could do it there, but I usually like to do it in the constructor. So we'll go ahead and say this dot onChange equals this dot onChange dot bind this. Or else when we use this inside of it, it's not going to know what we're talking about. So let's say onChange, and that's going to take in an event parameter. And then what I'm going to do here is we need to set the state. So we're going to say this dot set state, and we basically want to have the name of the input. Now instead of creating separate onChange functions for each one, I'm just going to grab the name using e.target. So we can actually go like this. We can use brackets and say e.target.name, and we want to set that to the value, whatever the value of the form, so or the input, so e.target.value. So now if we go back, we can actually type inside. Okay, and it's changing the state. If I go to my React extension, why am I getting that blue line right here? Is my internet out or something? Oh, never mind. Alright, so if I look at my React Chrome extension and we look at the post form, you can see that the state and the title, as if whatever I put in here is going to be added as the title and the body state. Okay. So next thing we want to do is create the onSubmit, so that when we submit this, it makes a post request to the JSON placeholder API, because as you can see, it can take a post request. Now, it doesn't actually get added to the database, but it will give us a response back with the post that we add along with the new ID, which will always be 101 because there's 100 stored. So the next one obviously is 101. So let's go ahead and go to our form tag, and we'll say on submit equals this dot on submit, and then up here we'll put in our on submit, and that'll take in an event parameter. And again, we have to bind this, so just like we did with the on change, we're just going to do that to the on submit. Alright, and then in here we're going to first of all prevent the default action, and then we want to create a post variable, and we're going to set that to what we want to submit, which is the title and body. So we can get the title from the state, because now it's in the state, and the body. Okay, and then what we'll do is make our fetch request. So the URL is going to be the same. It's going to be this here, except now we're going to be making a post request. So we need to add some additional stuff here. We need a second parameter of an object, and we need to specify the method, which is going to be post, and then we're going to specify headers because we need the content type. Alright, so we're going to say content dash type, and we need to let it know that it's going to be JSON, so that's going to be application slash JSON. Alright, and then we need one more thing here, which is going to be the body. That's the actual data, and that's going to be our post. Now we just want to wrap this in a function called JSON.stringify and prepare it to be sent. So we're going to make sure that that's a JSON string. Okay, and then we'll get our response. So we need to do a .then, and remember, we get the response. It's not the actual data yet. We need to tell it that we want JSON data, and then literally then we're going to get the data back, and let's just console log that. Oops. Alright, so let's make sure that we can actually make the post request and get the data back. So in the console, we'll say test, and submit, and there we go. So it gives us back the title, body, and the new ID, which is 101. Alright, so that's all I'm going to do as far as just React. Now we want to implement Redux, because we want to be able to submit this, and we want it to get added to the post down here, which is a completely separate component. Alright, we also want to fetch our posts from a post action file. Okay, because in Redux we're going to have actions. Okay, so when we submit the form, that'll be an action. When we actually just fetch the post when the page loads, that's an action. We'll also have reducers, which will basically define our state that's going to be sent back based on that action. So let's start with just installing Redux. There's a couple things we need to install. So I'm going to stop the server, and I'm just going to close everything out right now except for the main app.js file. And we're going to open up the sidebar again here. Let's make this bigger. Actually, we'll just make this full screen. So we want, oh, the clearing isn't working again. I hate that when that happens. So we want to install a few things. So let's say npm install, and we want Redux. We want React Redux, which is the library that binds them together. Redux itself has nothing to do with React. You can use Redux on its own or with other frameworks. It just works really well with React because we have this React Redux library. Another thing we want is Redux-Thunk, which is actually middleware for Redux. which allows us to directly access the dispatch method, so that we can make asynchronous calls from our actions, and I'll explain more about that in a little bit. But let's install these three things. Okay, that's the first step to implementing Redux. Alright, so now that we've done that, what we want to do is bring in what's called a provider. So the provider it's actually a React component, and it's basically the glue for React and Redux. So we want to bring that into our main app file. So we're going to say import provider, and that's going to be from the React Redux library. Okay, now once we do that, we need to wrap everything here with inside of that provider component. So right in the return here, we're going to do provider, and then we want to wrap it. So we want the ending tag down here, like that. Okay, now the provider takes what's called the store, okay, and the store holds a state. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say provider and then store equals store. Okay, so if we run this, let's say npm start React scripts is, sometimes it does this, React scripts is not recognized. If that happens, guys, just go ahead and run npm install again. I'm not exactly sure why that happens. Alright, so once that's done, let's run npm start, and now it should start our server back up. Now it's telling us store is not defined, and you guys probably saw that coming because it has no idea what this is. Now the store, let me just show you, let's see, where are we? Now I'm going to go to the documentation here, let's see, Redux docs API, and if we click on store, this gives you some information about the store. It holds the whole state tree of your application. The only way to change the state inside it is to dispatch an action to it. Okay, so and we'll create some actions in a little bit, but basically we create the store using a function called create store, and let me see, I think they have a page for that. Yeah, right here. So create store takes in three things: a root reducer. Okay, so we'll have a root reducer, and then you create other reducers based on your resources. So we're going to have a post reducer. If you have authentication, you might have an auth reducer. You might have a I don't know, to-dos reducer, and you'll combine all of those together into a root reducer and pass it to your store. It also takes in this preloaded state, which is just your initial state, okay, whatever your initial state is, and then any enhancer functions that you want to include. So third-party that have third-party capabilities. I'm actually going to show you how to use the Redux Chrome extension, and it's not something you can just install and use. You have to actually use it. You have to add it as an enhancer. Right now, well, actually, once I get this running, I'll show you. But we can make this work by just saying const store equals create store, which I actually have to bring in. And we could pass in just a kind of a dummy function here. So we'll just put in an arrow function to an empty array, and then the second one again is initial state, and then any enhancers, which we're going to use apply middleware, okay, which we also have to bring in. So create store and apply middleware, that's part of Redux, so we have to bring that in here. So we'll say import create store and apply middleware, and that's going to be from Redux. Oops. Alright, so if I save this, it should at least be able to run. Let me just make sure. Alright, so it's at least able to run. It's not doing anything, but at least we've brought in our provider, we wrapped our entire application basically, and we added this store, which just is nothing, has nothing in it. Now, normally what we would do is create, or what I would do is create a separate store file. Now, Redux and React, there's just a million different ways to do things, so you may do things a little different, but it doesn't make one thing right or one thing wrong. What I do is create a file here called store.js, and we're kind of going to move what we just did into that store. So we'll grab that and bring that in, and then we're just going to actually get rid of this const right here. I just wanted to show you that we could get it just at least working, but we want to now import the store from that file, which is ./store. Alright, and then inside store.js, we want to bring that stuff in from Redux. We also want to bring in thunk, which, remember, we installed Redux thunk. So I'm going to say import thunk from redux-thunk. And then let's create a variable for our initial state here if we wanted to have something here, but it's just going to be an empty object. And then I also like to create an array of middleware that we're going to use, which in this case is just going to be thunk. So we're just going to pass that in like that. And then we're going to create our store variable and set it to create store, just like you saw. And remember, it takes in those three things. First will be the root reducer. So we're going to create that in a second. So let's say root reducer, and then the initial state, and then any enhancers, okay, which includes apply middleware. And we want to pass in here, we're going to use the spread operator and just say middleware. Okay, because we put that inside of an array here. Now all we need to do is export the store and save. Alright, so I'm sorry, export default store. And I spelled that wrong. Okay, so obviously we get the root reducer is not defined because it's not. We haven't created it yet. So let's create a folder in our source. Not a file, a folder. And let's call this reducers. And then what I like to do is my root reducer I put inside a file called index.js. Okay, that way we can bring it into our store. So we can say import root reducer from /reducers. Since it's index.js, we don't even have to specify it. We can just do it like that. All right, now this is a lot of boilerplate. It's a lot of setup, and this is what really turned me off from Redux. But try not to let this bother you, because once you get it, I mean, and you don't even really have to get it. There's plenty of boilerplates. You can create your own boilerplate and just implement it so that you don't have to type all this stuff out every single time. So just keep that in mind. Now in the root reducer, what we want to do here is basically just combine all of our reducers, and there's actually a function to do that. So we're going to import that. So we're going to say import combine reducers, and that's going to be from Redux. Okay. Now we're going to have a post reducer, so let's bring that in. And that's going to be from ./post reducer, and we'll create that in a second. And then all you have to do is export default combine reducers, and then pass in an object with the reducers, and we can name it. So I'm going to call my post reducers posts, and we'll use that later. Okay, so that's all we have to do in the root reducer. Now, of course, we get the message can't find post reducer, so let's create that inside the reducers folder. and this is where it's basically going to evaluate any actions that are committed. Okay, any actions such as fetching our posts and creating a new post. Those are the two actions we're going to have. Now, for our actions, we create what are called types, and they're basically just constants. So inside the source folder, let's create another folder called actions. And let's create a file here called types.js. And inside types.js, like I said, it's just defining a couple constants. Okay, and we have to export them. So we're going to say export const, and we're going to have two actions or two types. One is going to be fetch posts, and we're just going to set it to a string with the same thing, fetch underscore posts. All right, and we're going to have another one called new post. So new post, new post, and that's it. Now we can bring these in. Let's close that up and bring it into our post reducer. So inside post reducer, we're going to import, and we want to bring in fetch underscore posts, and we want to bring in new underscore post, and that's going to be from that types file, which is .. We want to go outside of the reducers into the actions and then to types. Okay, now in our post reducer, we want to create our initial state. Okay, so our initial state is going to be an object, and we're going to have an items array. So this is going to represent the posts that come in from our action, and our action is where we're going to put the fetch request. And then I'm also going to have item, which is going to be an object, and that's going to represent, I'm sorry, just item, not items, and that's going to represent the post, the single post that we add when we get the response back. It's going to go in there. Okay, now we need a function, so I'm going to say export default function, and this basically evaluates what type that we're dealing with. So this takes in two things. It takes in the state, which is equal to our initial state, okay, and then it also takes in the action. Now the action will include a type, okay, it has to have a type, and that's what we're evaluating. So you could do this in different ways, but a common way is to use a switch. Okay, just a regular JavaScript switch, and we're going to look at the action.type. Okay, action is going to be an object. It'll have a type, which will be one of these. It'll also, if it includes data, it'll also have a payload. But you can add other stuff as well, but it has to have a type. So we want to take a look at which type is being passed. So we want to say, for the case of fetch posts, we want to, what do we want to do? Actually, let's not do this just yet because we don't have the actions created. We do want a default though, okay, and the default is just going to return the current state, and that's it. So let's save that. What did I do here? Let's see, unexpected switch. Oh, I spelled that wrong. Okay, so fetch post is defined but never used. New, that's fine. It just means that we brought these in but we haven't used them. So now that our reducer is basically ready to take in some types, let's go ahead and create our actions file. So inside actions, we're going to create post actions.js. Okay. And again, we're going to have to import our types. So I'll just copy from the reducer, except the types is actually in the actions folder. So we just want to do /types. All right. Now, each action or action creator is going to be a function that we need to export. So let's say export function, and we want one called fetch posts. Okay, now the thunk middleware allows us to actually use or call the dispatch function directly so that we can make asynchronous requests. So in here we want to return another function, and we want to pass in dispatch. Okay, so dispatch, you can kind of think of it as like a resolver and a promise. Whenever we want to send the data, we call dispatch. Just like if you were in a promise, you would call resolve and then pass in whatever you want to pass in. And in this case, it'll be the type, and it'll be at the payload if there's any data that we want to send. Okay, so this is actually where we want to create our fetch. So let's go back to our post component, or posts, and let's grab this fetch right here. Okay, so we want to cut that, and then we no longer need the component will mount, and we actually no longer need a constructor because we don't need the component state anymore, because the post is going to come from Redux. It's going to come from the application state, from the store, so we don't need that anymore. So right now things are going to break. It's not going to work, obviously, but we'll get to that. So in here, what we want to do is paste in the fetch, okay, and where we get the data, we're no longer going to use this .set state because that's used to set the component state. What we want to do is dispatch the data to the reducer. Okay, so let's get rid of this, and instead let's say dispatch, and we'll pass in, this takes in an object with the type that we want to send, and the type is going to be fetch underscore posts. Now we also want to send the data, okay, because we're getting this data right here. Actually, I'll call this post, that makes more sense. And then you could call this whatever you want. You could do posts like that, but I'm going to call it payload. Okay, I like to just call that whatever data is coming in with the type to the reducer, I like to call payload. Okay, so this will actually be reduced inside of this function. Now this kind of looks weird, having this export function fetch post. We can clean this up a little bit with ES6 syntax, so we can actually get rid of this return function dispatch right here. Make sure you get rid of the ending curly brace as well, and we can do export const fetch posts equals, and then any parameters for a fetch post would go in here, but then we also want to use an arrow and add dispatch. So dispatch and then another arrow. So this is the same thing as what you just saw, just in a cleaner way. Alright, so now that we did that, we're going to be dispatching fetch post to the reducer. So now in the reducer, in our switch, let's go ahead and add the case of fetch underscore posts, and then what we want to do is return, we want to return the current state. Okay, so we can do that with the spread operator, which is 3 dots. So we say state, and then we also want to add onto items action dot payload. Okay, remember we called it payload inside the action right here. So if we called this posts, then we could do action.posts. Okay, just like we sent the type, which is mandatory, and that's what's being evaluated, action.type. Okay, hopefully that makes somewhat of some sense. And then that's it. So we'll save, and now we basically have to implement this in our post component. Okay, so there's some things we need to do here to actually get the posts from the store. Now the first thing we want to do in our components is we want to import connect. Okay, so the provider we brought in from React Redux, from that library, connect also comes from that as well, and it does just that. It connects, basically connects your components to your Redux store that was provided by the provider component. All right, now we have an action that we want to call as well, which is this fetch post. So we need to bring that in as well. So let's say import fetch posts, and that's going to be from, let's see, it's going to be / actions / fetch posts, right? Yeah. No, I'm sorry. Actions post actions. Now, in order to connect our component to the Redux store, instead of just exporting the component here, we actually need to export default connect. And then what we're going to do is put two sets of parentheses. The second one is going to have the component, which is posts. And in here, we want to put in, I'm going to put in null. This is where we actually want to map our state to our properties. I'm not going to do that just yet. The second parameter is going to be that fetch post function. Okay. Now remember, fetch posts, it just calls the fetch request, right? Just like we were doing in the component will mount. Well, now we're going to go back up, and we actually, I shouldn't have got rid of the component will mount because we still are using it. We're just not doing the fetch there. We're going to call fetch posts. So let's say component will mount, and then this fetch post is going to be placed into a prop. Okay, so we say this dot props dot fetch posts, like that, to call that action. So let's just save this and see what happens. So we're going to get these warnings: new post defined, never used. That's fine. We just included it but haven't used it yet. If we go to our application, which is here, let's see what we're getting. Cannot read property posts of null. So post items. And that's to be expected because we no longer have posts inside of our component state. Okay, and we'll fix that in a minute. But this fetch post should be getting called if I were to go to the action fetch post, and right before the fetch do a console.log, and we'll just say fetching, and let's go back and let's reload. If we go up here, before anything, you'll see fetching. So it is in fact calling that action. Now when that action is called, what it's doing is fetching and then dispatching the type and the payload to the reducer. So let's see if that's being called. So we'll go to the case of fetch posts, and we'll console.log, and let's say we'll just say reducer, just to make sure that that's actually being dispatched and that's actually working. Alright, so if we reload, don't worry about any of this right now, and you'll see right here reducer. So we know that that's getting called. Now what it's doing is returning the state with the items that have been fetched. So now we have to go back to our component, our post component, and we have to get the new items from the state. Okay, and the way that we're going to do that is we're going to use something called map state to props. So we can get the state from Redux and map it to properties of the component, and then we can use that inside of our component. So we would just want to create down here a function called map state to props, and we're going to say it's going to take our state. We're going to use an arrow function here, and we're going to pass in an object, and let's say posts. We want to set that to state.post. Now the reason I'm using the word post right here is because in our reducer, our root reducer, which is right here, that's what we set as our post reducer, posts. If I set this to something else, then that's what we would be using in this spot right here. All right, now what do we want from our reducer? We want the items, correct? That's what we want to put inside the post property of this component. So we're going to say state.post.items, like that. So now we should now have a this.props.post because we mapped the state, the items from the state to the post property. So right here where we mapped through the state post, that no longer exists. We want to change this to props.post. Okay, so let's save that and let's go back to our application. Cannot read map of undefined. Let's see. Looks like I did something wrong here. Oh, once we create map state to props, we have to pass it in here. And there we go. So you can see now that our posts are actually coming in. Okay, they're coming in from our Redux state. Now we should actually add our props to prop types in React. So we're going to just go ahead and import. Actually, I'm going to put it up here, not there. We're going to say import prop types from prop-types, and then down here we're going to say post dot prop types equals an object, and remember the fetch post function is actually a property, so we're going to say fetch posts, set that to prop types, and it's a function, so we want to say func, and then let's say is required as well. Okay, and then we also have our post property, because remember we mapped the state, the items in the state to the post property. So we'll say prop types, and that's an array, so we'll say dot array is required. Okay, so I know that you're probably thinking that is a lot just to fetch those posts. Okay, I know you're thinking that because that's what I was thinking. But once you have your initial structure set up, you have your actions, you have your reducers. If you want to add something new, it's easy. You already have the boilerplate all set up. Now, one thing I want to do before we do the add post or the new post action and reducer and all that, I want to implement the Redux Chrome extension. All right, so let's see. I already have it installed, but if you go to, let's say, Chrome extension Redux. So it's the Redux Dev Tools, okay? And it's very, very helpful because you can see your component state. You can see when you submit an action, you can see the difference in the state, what's changed, all that stuff. Now, if I go ahead and I open that, I'm just going to make this bigger, and you can see I have it installed. It's down here. If I go to Redux, and I'm actually going to put this on the side here, and it says no store found, make sure you follow the instructions. I'm just going to make this big. Why can I? Alright, so it says make sure you follow the instructions, and you could click and go to that page if you want, but I'm going to show you those instructions. Basically, we need to implement it into our application. It's not something that's just going to work right off the bat. Okay. So let's go back to Jesus, I have a lot of stuff open here. Let me just close some of this. Yeah, all right. So what we want to do is go to our app.js file, not our app.js, our store. And we want to add this Redux extension as an enhancer. Okay, so to do that, we're going to bring in something else from Redux called Compose. And then what we want to do is go down to where we have our apply middleware, and we want to wrap that in Compose. because we want multiple enhancers here. So we want to wrap that, and then we're going to go ahead and put a comma at the end here. And then this is where we want to implement the Redux Dev Tools. So we want to do window dot double underscore Redux, and this is what it's going to tell you to do if you follow that link. DevTools underscore extension double underscore double ampersand window dot double underscore Redux DevTools extension, and we want to do double underscore and then parentheses. Alright, so now let's save that and let's go back to Chrome, and now it's working. Okay, so I'm just going to reload the page, and you'll see that fetch posts is being called. That action is being called, and if we look at our state, we have inside post. Now the reason it says post is because that's what we used as our post reducer name. If we called it something else, it would say something else, and you can see in our items we have all of our posts. So this is our application level state, not a single component. And we also have item, which is empty. Okay, but that's what we're going to take care of next when we add a new post. It'll get put into that piece of state. Okay, and there's other things you can do, testing, jest temp testing and stuff like that. You can see the action fetch posts. So this is a really handy tool to use, and we'll be using this in my next course quite a bit. So now let's implement new post. Okay, so we'll go back to VS Code, and we can close up the store file, and we're going to go to post actions, and let's create a new action. So I guess I'll just copy that, and instead of fetch post, this is going to be called, let's call it create post. Okay, and this is actually going to take in some data. It's going to take in the post data, because remember, we're submitting a post. Alright, now when we make our fetch request, it's not going to be this, so we can get rid of this. What we'll do is go back to our post form component, and we're going to grab that fetch request. So right here. Alright, so this ends right here, so we want to just completely cut that out. And let me just put this is where we're going to call action. We'll save that. We'll go back to our post actions, and we'll paste that in. Okay, now once we make the request, we're going to get back the data, which will be, remember, the single item, the single post. So we want to then dispatch just like we did here. Okay, so we're going to replace the console log with the dispatch, and this time the type is going to be new underscore post, and the payload, instead of data, remember, it gives us a single post back, so we'll just change this to post. Okay, and we'll change this to post, and that will be the payload, the single post. And that's it. That's our action. So let's save it. Let's see, post is not defined. 20 posts. Okay, so right here it's saying post is not defined, because up here I called it post data. So we just want to change that. Okay, so now remember, once this happens, it's going to dispatch to the reducer new post. So let's go to our reducer, our post reducer, and let's add in a new case for new underscore post. Okay, so what we're going to do here now, the way since we're using JSON placeholder, it's a little different because it doesn't actually add our new item to the database, so it's not like we can just refetch our items. So we're going to do it a little bit different. We're going to return just the new item, and then we're going to basically push that on to the items or to the post property inside the post component. So basically we're just going to return, I can just copy this. We're just going to return the current state plus item is going to be the payload. Okay, remember, this payload is going to be that single post. Okay, and that's all we should have to do here, so we'll go ahead and save that. And now our post reducer should be done, so we can actually close this out. And let's go back to our post form component. And since we're using Redux here, we need to bring in connect. Okay, from React Redux. Let's also bring in prop types. And we also need to bring in our action, which is create post. Okay, so create post comes from /actions/ post actions /. Okay, so now that we did that, where we called the fetch request before is where we want to put our action. Okay, so on submit, we're going to then do this .props .create post, and then we're going to pass in that post object, which is this here. Okay, so we're just replacing the fetch with this because our fetch is now inside of the action. And then let's go down to the bottom here, and again, instead of just exporting the component itself, we want to export connect. We want to put in here the component name, post form, and then we want as a second parameter the create post, like that. And then we should add that as a prop type, so we'll say post form dot prop types create post prop types dot, and that's a function. We'll say is required and save. All right, now let's see if that gets called. So we'll go to let's see, post actions, and let's say console.log. We'll say action called and save. Okay, so if I go, actually we should see it here. Let's just submit this, and you'll see here we don't even need the console. New post was just called. And if we look at the diff, this shows us basically what was added, and we added to our item in our store. If we look at the complete state here, you'll see our 100 items and our new item. And if we go to our console, you'll see action called. Okay, so if you're using this Redux extension, which I would definitely recommend using, you don't really even need the console logs and stuff like that. You can use this to debug your application and see what's going on. All right, so we know that that's being called. So now what do we want to do? Remember in our reducer, where we're now sending out the state with the item. So if we go back to our posts component, okay, this is the post component, we can get that single item because it's basically being dispersed to all of our components. And again, that's the purpose of Redux, so that you can have one, basically one single source of truth, one store, one state that you can just send to all your components. So what we'll do is in map state to props, we're going to also add a prop called new post. Okay, and that is going to come from state.post, that's our reducer, and we want item. Okay, that's the piece of state that we want to put in this property. So now that that's a property, we'll add it here, and that's going to be an object. Okay, now let's see, now that we did that, how do we want to use this new post? What do we want to do with this? Well, I want to add it to the list. Now there's another lifecycle method, and there's like I said, with React and Redux, there's so many ways to do the same thing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use another lifecycle method called component will receive props. Okay, so when it receives a new property from the state, this will run, and it takes in a parameter of next props. Okay, so we can actually access that new post property here. We want to check for it to see if it's actually there. So we'll say next props dot new post. Okay, so if it's there, then we want to just say this dot props dot posts, which is all of our posts, all of the items, and we just want to add on to it. Now we could do push, but that'll add on to the end. I want to add it to the beginning, so I'm going to use unshift. Okay, and then we can just simply do next props dot new post like that. So now let's save that, and hopefully everything went okay. And now let's say test post, this is a test, and let's submit, and there it is. Okay, and you can see over here, if we look at the diff, we have our item test post. This is a test. It has the ID of 101. Now if I submit another one, you see that it's going to get added. The ID is still going to be 101 though, because we're dealing with an API where we're not actually updating their database. So it just gives us our request back with the next ID, which is always going to be 101 because we didn't really add another post to their database, so there's no 102. So hopefully that makes sense. If this was a full stack application, then obviously the next one would be 102 and so on. And it's a little confusing with this API, but I couldn't really think of anything else to test with. This is pretty easy to test with the JSON placeholder. Alright, so I mean that's pretty much it as far as actions, reducers, types, all that stuff. It's once you get the hang of it, it's not that bad, and now you could see how easy it was to add that functionality to add a post. We just added the action, we sent the type and the payload to the reducer, and then the reducer, we decided how we wanted our state to come down, and we just wanted that single item to get added to our state, and then it reflected in the other component inside the post component. Okay, so hopefully you guys enjoyed this, and hopefully at least some of it was understandable. I find it really hard to explain state managers for some reason. Flux is even worse. I hate Flux. But you know, Redux, it is necessary for larger applications. So if this stuff interests you guys, I'm actually creating a course now, a Udemy course that should be ready in about 25-30 days. We're going to create an entire social network with React, Redux, and then we're going to have Express on the back end. Okay, it's going to be a complete MERN stack application, and we're going to be doing a lot of this. So if this confused you a little bit, that course we'll be doing a lot more of it, so you'll be even more confused. No, I'm just kidding. So you'll actually be able to see it more in action, and you'll get the hang of it, and you'll see how beneficial it actually is. Alright, I apologize for the long ass video. I probably didn't need to start from scratch, but again, I don't like to just start in the middle and have something already prepared. I like you guys to be able to follow along and you know, be able to do everything in the video. So thanks guys, that's it, and I will see you next time. Coding Dojo is a programming school that turns beginners into developers in only 14 weeks. If you're serious about landing a career in tech but lack the formal education or background, Coding Dojo will get you there in no time. With over 3,000 graduates to date, over 90% of their grads land jobs within 3 months of graduating, often making over $70K per year at tech firms of all sizes, from companies like Google to local startups. To learn more, visit codingdojo.com or click the link in the description below.